because if you're open and you really want, it takes time to build your craft. But I've never been in a hurry in my career, because if you're open and you really want to hone your craft, ultimately it's so much more satisfying.
Welcome to The Path, where I, Ryan Roslansky, sit down with the biggest change makers, innovators, and thought leaders in the world. At the end, we'll see what turning points shaped the journey of these incredible success stories. Today, I sit down with Dara Khosrowshahi. Dara made headlines when he announced that after 12 years, he was quitting his CEO job at Expedia to take the reins at Uber, a company that was going through back-to-back controversies. It seemed ludicrous. Why take on leading an organization that was taking a cultural nosedive? For him, it was all about impact. Here's how Dara paved his path. We all know you as the CEO of Uber, but I want to take it way, way back to a young Dara.
Many moons ago, your early childhood, and maybe start with that first time that you remembered it all, what you maybe wanted to be when you grew up. Oh, God. So I grew up in Iran, and we grew up big family. We lived in a big compound, cousins, uncles, etc. around. And my family had a big family business, and everybody was in the family business. So it was always, without question, we would eventually step into the family business.
The path was made for you already, yeah.
Totally. Of course, a small thing called the Iranian Revolution interrupted that, and threw all of those plans aside. We lost everything as a family. Everything blew up. I was about 9 years old. It was about 1978. Mm-hmm. And it was about coming into this new country, learning the language a little bit better, and working my way from being an outsider to someone who belonged.
What was kind of your thought about school during those times?
School was very important. So with my family, and I think this is true with certainly Iranian families and immigrant families, education was everything. Mm. You were either going to be a doctor or an engineer or nothing, in that order. I remember at Brown, I studied bioelectrical engineering because I wanted to be an engineer, but I always wanted optionality to be a doctor to make dad happy.
So you make your way to college. At a certain point, you decide, I actually have to start a job somewhere. What was that process like for you at the time?
Well, it was very well planned out, and then I completely ignored all plans. I got a job to be an engineering manager, and then I happened to fall in love with a woman in New York City. And I said, forget about all this career stuff. I'm going to New York. At the time, the only jobs in New York were investment banking jobs. I was lucky enough to get a job at a bank called Allen and Company.
At any point there, when you started to get into banking, were you drawn back to I want to be more in the engineering space, or had you just thrown it away at that point?
For me, I loved being in investment bank. But for me, ultimately, I was always, there was a client, and we were advising the client, and we weren't owning any of the problems and solutions. And that always left me a little empty. And I never got to experience growing a business, having a team. And I always remember this advice that I got from Herbert Allen, who was running Allen and Company, was to bet on people, not companies. You're young and you're like, yes, sir, you listen, but you don't really listen. But for me, the bet that I made, there was Barry Diller.
Barry Diller plays a huge role in Dara's path. It starts in the 90s when Barry becomes one of Dara's clients. He was attempting a hostile takeover of Paramount, and Dara was helping him do that. That deal didn't happen, but Barry was so impressed with Dara's work, he recruited him. Together, they go on to acquire companies like Match.com, Ticketmaster, and Expedia. And eventually, Expedia spins off, and Dara steps in as chief executive officer. He goes on to be one of the most successful CEOs in the country, quadrupling Expedia's revenues and serving as CEO for 12 years, which, let me tell you, is a long tenure. At a certain point, you've been at Expedia. Life, I never say life is easy as a CEO, but you know what you're doing, and you've been doing this for a while. And it seems like out of nowhere, you get this call for a company called Uber. What's going through your mind at that point?
Well, the time that I got called, Uber was a super hot company that was going through a historically difficult time. So honestly, when I first got the call, my first thought was, heck no. Why would I ever do that? But then I had actually drinks with a friend, Daniel Ek, who is the founder and CEO of Spotify. I said, Daniel, why would I ever do that? I've been a speaker for 13 years. I'm happy. I'm having a great time. I'm interested. And, there are these moments in your life where Daniel looks at me with his cold Scandinavian eyes and says, Dara, this one is life about being happy. It's about having impact. You have to have impact. That was was that special moment. I don't think there are that many opportunities for individuals who have outsized impact.
The impact Dara has made at Uber is remarkable, starting with overhauling the company culture, abandoning the hustle mentality, and instilling a sense of empathy and humanity across the employee base. Dara grew the business into different verticals and led Uber through its IPO. None of it would be possible were it not for him taking a risky leap.
The one piece of advice that I give a lot of people in terms of their career is don't overplan your career. I see young people make mistakes all the time. They say, well, I want to be a VP by this time, or I want to make X amount of money. And there's nothing wrong with having an idea directionally of where you want to go.
Yeah.
But if your idea is too narrow, part of the human condition is if you see signal that doesn't agree with that direction, you're just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
So for me, the advice that I give folks is, hey, have an idea of where you want to go. You've got to be open for opportunity. Then you've got to you got to jump at it. You've got to take advantage of it. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes some luck.
No, absolutely. I mean, even hearing like the path that from the early days in Iran, no one could have planned any of this. When you look back, what do you think are maybe 2 or 3 of the most valuable skills that were necessary for you to be where you are today?
So one I wouldn't consider a skill, although you might, is one's just hard work.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Ryan, I worked my ass off, and I always wanted to make sure that if I'm in a group of 6 or 7, we're friends, we work together, but I'm going to work harder than anyone else. I think another skill that I actually learned from Barry is actually about listening. There was one time we were going through strategic plan and with my team, and afterwards we had a one-on-one. He said, how you feel about it? I go, I feel okay. He goes, no, you don't. There's something wrong. Tell me what's wrong. And he's always scratching at that surface. And ultimately that got me to a better place, which was I wasn't okay with the direction that my team was recommending. I didn't want to go against them because as a leader, you don't want to undercut your team one way or the other. I still remember Barry said, if you go with everyone's recommendation, you're going to go with the average. And he looked at me and he said, Dara, I didn't hire you to be average. And you can't always as a leader go on your own, but once in a while, the leader has to make a call that goes against the grain, that is distinctly unaverage. Then the last thing I would say is, don't be in too much of a hurry. How long have you been on LinkedIn now?
I've been there for 14 years and the CEO for almost 3. So
yeah. So, you look at Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Jamie Dimon, Jack Welch. Greatness takes time. It takes time to build your craft. People talk about financially the magic of compounding. There's a career compounding that's magical.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a 3 years or 4 years and out kind of a person, you're really missing out on that career compounding. It does take time, but when you take advantage of that, magic happens in that.
So here's my takeaway. You could be as young as Dara was in Iran with a solid career plan. But sometimes life gets in the way. Sometimes in the worst ways, or sometimes in great ways. And you'll find yourself on a path you never expected. And it's up to you to orient yourself, identify your true north, and chase it with everything you've got. Because an unfamiliar path doesn't mean it can't lead you to a rewarding place. By the way, Dara's dad also gave him some advice. He said, if a company that's a verb offers you a job, say yes. So for the record, you can LinkedIn someone.
Do you hesitate about thinking about becoming the CEO?
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to The Path, where I, Ryan Roslansky, sit down with the biggest changemakers, innovators, and thought leaders in the world. At the end, we'll see what turning points shaped the journey of these incredible success stories. Today, I sit down with Angela Ahrens. Angela has one of the most shocking and inspirational career shifts corporate America has seen in decades. After 8 incredible years transforming Burberry into a fashion powerhouse, she quit her CEO job and took on an SVP role at Apple. For many, it did not make sense. A fashion exec moving to tech? But to her, it made perfect sense. Here's how Angela paved her path.
You grew up in Indiana, in a small town in Indiana. And if I were to go way back then to a young Angela, when was the first time you had any kind of inkling of what you maybe wanted to be one day when you grew up?
A long time ago. I am from very, very humble beginnings. I'm one of 6 kids, and I was the third. And so we all worked, and that's just what we did. And so I would put the chart on the refrigerator with all of the chores, and I'd get $1 for that, $1 for that. And I used a lifeguard growing up. And then in between, in my spare time, I loved fashion magazines, and I sewed. So I always somewhat knew at a young age, I kind of wanted to angle into the fashion industry. And I just vowed at a really young age that it wasn't going to be work to me.
All right, so at a certain point, you decide that college is the right path for you.
Yeah, because I really debated it.
Yeah.
Because I was hungry. I kind of got the bug my junior, senior of high school that I was moving to New York. And my sister went to Ball State University, and so I went up to visit her one weekend. And I literally, they say signs in life, and I literally walked into this one building. There was this huge sign talking about this new merchandising and marketing course. And it was funny. It was like they wrote it for me. So I studied merchandising and marketing just as the little sign said, because I went to college to get out.
Yeah.
I didn't go to college to find a spouse. I didn't go, I literally went to get out, and I needed to work the whole time through college. I took a job at Musicland in the Muncie Mall. And I would say it's okay because it was the only thing between me and New York.
This all eventually leads you to your first job.
The career path was get to New York and get a job in the fashion industry. And this menswear company, and they happened to be hiring. Now, I didn't really want into menswear. I didn't really want into sales, but it didn't matter. It's not always the door you want to go in, but getting experience, getting that first thing, I think, is always the hardest. Once you're in, then you can go.
And oh boy, did she go. After a couple of years at that menswear company, she bounced around some jobs, worked with some designers, eventually landing at Donna Karan, or as most know it, DKNY. She spent 7 years there, working crazy hours, making her way up to president of the company. She ends up finding her way to women's apparel company Liz Claiborne. You might know it as Kate Spade.
It's getting going. Life's good. What led to what seems like a pretty amazing and quickly successful career path through fashion?
Yeah, you make it sound so easy.
Yeah, it was easy looking back.
I think it was nothing but sheer work and hours, and it was my passion. But I used to say that I used to lay in bed at night because I lived all by myself. I was lonely at times, and so I got a cat, and he kept me company. But I also used to say to myself, but just imagine, most people can't work like you can work. Most people can't work or won't work 60, 80 hours a week. And if you do that in 20 years, that's like 40 years experience. And I was just a sponge.
Yeah, but you were doing it because you cared about it. It inspired you. It wasn't like you said, I want to be the CEO, so I'm going to do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always say I never even, never talked about becoming a CEO. Yeah. It was never on my radar.
Liz Claiborne is where Angela truly stood out in corporate America. She started out as VP of merchandising, helped lead acquisitions of companies like Juicy Couture and Lucky Brand. At this point, she has this fashion thing down. And by the end of her tenure, she was executive vice president. But Angela is more than just the roles she's held. She has a real talent, even a gift for knowing exactly how to attract customers to a brand. Combine that with her work ethic, and you have the foundation for a CEO. And that's what Burberry saw, and why she got an unsolicited phone call from them, asking her to become their CEO.
Do you hesitate about thinking about becoming the CEO?
Oh, yeah. It couldn't be any better. And I had had my third child and we just got the country house. And I mean, it's perfect, but I wasn't open. I said, no, thank you. And one day there was 2 EVPs at the company. One called me up and she goes, do you know what you're doing? Do you know how few women CEOs there are in the world? Do you realize that, and she gave me this incredible lecture almost on behalf of women. And then I lost sleep. When you lose sleep, it's kind of all over.
Angela joined Burberry after years of it underperforming. It was losing its reputation for fine luxury. But she came in and changed it all, reestablishing it as one of the finest luxury brands in the world, all while tripling the company's stock value. It was impressive. So impressive it caught the eye of Apple CEO Tim Cook. He was looking for someone to revamp its stores. So Angela gets another unsolicited phone call, asking her to join Apple as an SVP leading retail.
Was that the craziest call you ever received? Did you say, this sounds absurd?
My thing was, I was such a student and an admirer of the company and the brand and a loyalist. So I thought, out of respect, I need to go out and meet with them. But I thought, I'm not leaving. And then I was blown away by him, the man.
Angela ends up joining Apple, rebranding its physical locations from retail stores with minimal sales to community building hubs. Then, in 2019, she announced that she was leaving to spend time with her family. But just a year later, she gets yet another phone call, this time during the pandemic, asking her to become the chair of Save the Children International. Of course, she said yes, and started her down a new path, not in fashion, not in tech, but in nonprofits.
You look back at your time, all this stuff you keep adding to who you are as a professional and as a person. What are maybe a couple of the most valuable things you picked up for your career?
It's funny, I love the old Steve Jobs quote. He said, you can never connect the dots looking forward. Only when you look back does it all make sense. And so it's funny, I look back and it was it was the Liz portfolio job and the working with founders and understanding how left brain, right brain I am and how to build incredible teams that set me up for Burberry. Burberry was almost like a startup. It was 150 years old, but it was not, it had gone through a renaissance, really slowed. We had to turn it around. So everything I learned at Burberry was actually a warm up for Apple. And now I feel that everything I learned at Apple was a warm-up for Save the Children International. I think the most fascinating thing is, if I look back, I actually think that I've learned more in the valleys than I have on the mountaintops. And I used to tell myself that at Burberry when there'd be something really hard just coming at me. And I'd be like, this is a test, just a test. You can pass this test, and when you do, you're going to get a bigger one thrown at you. I'm sure in your career, you've come across the same thing.
Well, I'll tell you what resonates a ton is how you lead when things aren't going your way. I think that's the key to all of it. When I was a little boy, my dad, he had a little cutout. It was a Shakespeare quote. It said, when the seas are calm, all ships alike show mastership in floating. And I'm a little kid, and I think it's a quote about boats. But what it's really about is that it's not how you act or react when things are going your way. Anyone can look good when that's happening. It's what you do when things aren't going your way. Last thing, what is your best career advice?
I asked them, what's your passion or what breaks your heart that kills you that you want to lean into? Because that's a passion as well. Because if it's not your passion, it's a job. And life is too short just to have a job.
Life is too short just to have a job. It's not just the title she's talking about. Every step she took in her journey had an impact in her career without her even realizing it. Doing chores for cash established her work ethic. Lifeguarding in high school and that job at the mall strengthened her people skills. This was all a means to an end for her. But in reality, her passion for fashion turned these so-called jobs into incredible career opportunities. So here's my takeaway. In your career, there's no moment wasted. No matter where you find yourself right now, find the opportunity. Because at the end, the moment you're in right now is what paves the way to what's next down your own path.
What made you think you could do it?
Well, what made me think that I could do it? I'm crazy.
Welcome to The Path, where I, Ryan Roslansky, sit down with the biggest change makers, innovators, and thought leaders in the world. And at the end, we'll see what turning point shaped the incredible journey of these success stories. Today, I sit down with Dr. Kelly Burton, a political scientist and serial entrepreneur. In 2014, she was running an apparel startup and working with companies like Macy's. But 3 years later, the company ran out of money and shut down. Having experienced the hardships of scaling a business firsthand, she decided to pivot from being an entrepreneur to helping future entrepreneurs of color. The common thread for Kelly has always been this thought of, I struggled, but how can I make sure that others don't have to? Her path perfectly illustrates the reason I started this series. It's messy and full of sharp turns, but there is one clear purpose driving her through it all. She wanted to help people. Here's how Kelly Burton paved her path.
I want to go way, way back.
Way back.
To the first time when you can remember thinking about, I know what I want to be when I grow up.
So when you're the eldest in your family, you become almost like a caregiver to your younger siblings, to your parents. You're always looking to help and be in service. And I also grown up in Camden, New Jersey, which, and in the 80s when I was growing up, was the murder capital of the country. A lot of, despair and drugs and a lot of the things that make neighborhoods difficult to grow up in. So seeing that, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a part of the solution to ensure that kids get to grow up in communities that are loving and have the things that are necessary in order for you to be safe and be well. All I knew is that I wanted to help people, but every year that looked different.
At first, she thought the way to do that was through politics. So she moved to Atlanta and got her bachelor's in political science. She interned at the Georgia State Capitol, and then when she couldn't find a job after college, she decided to get her PhD.
I heard you once say, I really enjoyed that doctor until like 3 months later, I started to get my student loan payments.
That's right. It's real cute.
If you could go back in time, would you have done that over?
Well, I thought it was a path that I needed to take in order to change the world. And I thought it was going to happen through politics. And then I realized that politics is influenced by business and influenced by money.
Yep.
And so if I really wanted to have the impact that I wanted, I need to be proximate to people who were business leaders and business moguls, if not to kind of build my own company. And so that's essentially what put me on the path to entrepreneurship. And then when I graduated, I just decided to open my own consultancy.
In 2009, Kelly launched Nexus Research Group, specializing in helping organizations create social change in low-wealth communities and communities of color. And that was her first taste of being her own boss.
So let's talk about that first pivot. Remember that time period in your life or what you were thinking or any framework you used to make that decision to go and start your own company?
I'm bossy, Ryan. I'm bossy. I have always wanted to be in charge.
Yeah.
I've always been in the mindset, like, just give me the ball and let me run the play.
Yeah.
So being able to run my own business would put me in charge and kind of like a master of my own destiny.
All right, so you make that leap.
Yep.
Things are going well for a while?
Yes.
Like, talk about that first company.
I went from making $12,000 a year as a graduate student
Yep. Yeah.
to making $300,000 a year. So I'm like, I'm balling, right? Oh my God, I'm killing the game. But what I, realized it was very hard to scale that.
Got it.
Because it's hard to find those opportunities where you'll get a multi-year, 6-7-figure contract that's going to enable you to hire people and to scale. So then I'm like, okay, I need a product-based business because that's something I could scale. The name of it was Bodyology. And if Lululemon and Spanx had a baby, that would be Bodyology, right?
Yeah.
When I was running my consultancy, I was really, really busy. And I started to have all these symptoms. Turns out that I had Graves' disease.
Oh my goodness.
So Graves' disease is autoimmune condition. One of the things that I was really struggling to manage was these sweats. So men had like undershirts. Women don't have that. So that was the impetus behind Bodyology.
So I love that. That was based off of a need and that was based on helping people. And that's it's a really, really inspiring story. First of all, like, what made you think you could do it?
Well, what made me think that I could do it? I'm crazy. I just wake up.
Important ingredient.
As many times as I hit a brick wall, I'm just like, all right, well, that's just the wrong way. Let me just go this way. It's just part of how I'm wired.
So that goes to a certain point and you decide no more?
Well, I had put over $200,000 of my own money into it. And I was like, I just don't have access to the resources necessary to scale. And the big lesson out of that was, wow, it's really hard as a person of color to scale a business from multiple reasons. I didn't necessarily have the coaching or support to help me figure out kind of the, venture angle. I did not have, access to the distribution channels. Brick and mortar retail was in a really funky place around that time. Didn't know how to get online and do the e-commerce play. So I just ran out of options and ran out of money.
Did you feel like you didn't want to, you were being forced to make this choice?
I had a conversation with a good friend who said, Kelly, if somebody gave you $1 million today to take Bodyology forward, would you take it? And I said, no.
You knew.
I knew. I was done.
Wasn't it?
Energetically.
Yeah.
I was in. You pour a whole lot into a startup. And a lot of it, to push past it, you have to have the passion and the drive. And when that's depleted, you don't really have anything left.
What Kelly's saying is true. Running your own business takes a lot out of you. Kelly felt burnt out by the end, but her desire to help people never faded. She simply had to find another way.
I wrote a piece on how to keep your startup out of the startup graveyard because I was so frustrated with all the success stories. 7 to 8 to 9 out of 10 startups fail depending on the math, right? So I wanted to kind of be very transparent about my failure, to say, these are the things I wish I had known 5 years ago when I was starting this thing. And that article just triggered a whole lot of outreach to say, oh my God, this is my story. And so I started Founders of Color, which was all about helping entrepreneurs of color to scale. They just don't know how to get over the hump from being a solopreneur, sole operator, to a viable, sustainable business. And that was our work at Founders of Color.
In June 2020, she helped launch Black Innovation Alliance, dedicated to funding, training, and supporting Black entrepreneurship and closing the racial wealth gap. In the last 2 years, it has raised nearly $7 million and helped over 370,000 entrepreneurs. That's pretty legit.
Did you ever think about taking a more traditional path at any point along the way?
Never.
Never. I can tell in your face that never even
Never. And I'll tell you why. Because I built my life to be unencumbered. Build the life you want. The life you want. Not the life that your spouse wants, not the life that your in-laws want, or the life that your parents want. Build the life that you want. Your career is only a part of that. And figure out exactly how you're going to ensure that you're able to figure out success for you.
So here's my takeaway. Like Kelly, your path may be filled with dead ends. But when you tie your career to purpose rather than jobs and titles, that winding and sometimes arduous path will seem worth it. For Kelly, that purpose was helping people. She helped women gain confidence with her apparel company, and through different organizations has helped thousands of entrepreneurs of color grow their own businesses. And what I found over the years is if you can pave your career path at the intersection of doing good for the world and doing well in business, you'll find meaningful moments along the way.
At some point, things happen. You are the CEO. And the question is, have you prepared all your life to be there?
Welcome to The Path, where I, Ryan Roslansky, sit down with the biggest change makers, innovators, and thought leaders in the world. And at the end, we'll see what turning points shaped the incredible journey of these success stories. Today, I sit down with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Satya was named CEO of Microsoft in 2014. He has led the company through a major reinvention, and most importantly, ushered in a positive cultural shift internally among employees. I've seen it firsthand because Satya is my boss, and I've had a front row seat watching as he brings teams together to work towards executing on the vision of Microsoft. Here's how Satya Nadella paved his path. As a young Satya Nadella growing up in India, I'd love to hear how that part of your life, helped shape who you are as a professional today.
My parents played a massive role. I think who I am today. My father was, a civil servant, an economist, and my mother was a Sanskrit professor. And so they were exact opposites of each other in some sense. They could not agree on anything except give me lots of room, quite frankly, and a lot of confidence to become my own person, pursue my own passions. I was mostly focused on playing cricket. I was not great academically. Growing up middle class in India, that sort of sometimes is challenging. But one of the interesting things that I distinctly remember is American technology, right? I remember the first time I started using a computer. The malleability of software was the thing that's got me hooked. I would say I was like, one of those people who took it and said, that's my future. But it was there. It was latent.
Satya went off to college first in India, where he got his bachelor's in electrical engineering, and then in Wisconsin, where he got his master's in computer science, his true passion. He ended up landing an engineering job at Sun Microsystems, a legendary company in the Silicon Valley that pioneered some of the most important technologies adopted by the computer industry. Although his time at Sun Microsystems was short, it continued to solidify a strong foundation in computer science and networking technologies. Eventually, you get to this point in your career where there's a decision, and I'm sure, you had the opportunity to go work basically anywhere you wanted to, but you chose Microsoft. Can you take us back to that? It was 30 years ago now. That decision when you said, hey, Microsoft's a place that I want to, go make a career out of. There's something here that's drawing me towards that. What were you kind of going through at that point?
I felt like, wow, it's that feeling of empowerment. I individually felt that I wanted to make sure that everyone else can feel because of computing. That freedom you get to express yourself.
Satya joined Microsoft at the dawn of personal computing. Among his first projects was Windows NT, one of the first operating systems released by Microsoft. Around that same time, Satya was commuting every weekend from the Microsoft offices in Washington to Chicago, where he was working on his MBA. He went on to lead projects like the Interactive TV Experiment, Bing, Microsoft Office, and Xbox Live. And then as an EVP, he led the development of one of the world's largest cloud infrastructures in the world. I asked him, even though he spent 30 years in Microsoft, if he ever considered his path linear.
I remember distinctly walking into Building 22 at Microsoft in 1992, thinking that's the greatest job on earth I have, and I don't need anything more. There was never a time where I thought the job I was doing, all throughout my 30 years of Microsoft, that somehow I was doing that as a way to some other job. I felt the job I was doing there was the most important thing. I genuinely felt it. And then, of course, it helped me get my next job. As I always say, somebody, when they ask me, what's the best career advice? I say, look, don't wait for your next job to do your best work. I think sometimes we define our jobs narrowly. One of the managers I worked for sort of said to me, hey, what if you just did a thought experiment and sort of thought of your job not as your job, but as my job? And what would you do? That was like a very cool reframing. Then I was taking more of the challenges of my manager off their back so that I was sort of expanding my job, not waiting for my promotion or to be in their job. And it just naturally happened. So a little bit of it is, it's never linear. But there are no, in fact, if anything, like, it's not like the day before I was CEO, somebody said you're going to be CEO. That was not even a thought. And the thing though is, at some point, things happen. You are the CEO. And the question is, have you prepared all your life to be there, not hoping that to be a destination? Otherwise, you cannot grow if you don't think your growth comes because of what you're doing.
Among his many jobs over the years, Satya has also played the role of mentor and role model to professionals both in and out of the company. When someone comes to you and says, Satya, I want to be a leader, what's your best advice for me? What do you typically tell them?
First of all, I'd say leadership is such a privilege, right? Whenever you're leading someone, you don't think of it as an entitlement. You should think of it as a privilege. And the question is, how do you earn it? Like, how do you stay true to that? The first thing is, leaders have this innate capability to come into a situation that is ambiguous, uncertain, confusing, and bring clarity. Right? However smart you are, if you come in and create more confusion in an already uncertain time, that's not leadership. The second one is leaders create energy, right? Basically, whenever you meet someone, you come out of it and say, oh, wow, I was energized by that person. And this is not about, oh, my team is great, everybody else sucks. That's not leadership. It's about bringing all constituents inside your organization, outside your organization. Don't be confined by who reports to me or who's in my org. Leaders are people who can create energy in broad swaths. And then the last thing is leaders also don't wait for the perfect pitch, right? Or the perfect weather to perform, which is you got to take the hand you've been dealt and with all the constraints. After all, leaders solve over-constrained problems by knowing how to unconstrain themselves and their teams and drive success. So these are the three things I'd say, even Ryan, for me, look, none of us are perfect at this. Each day I look at it and say, God, could I have brought more clarity? Could I have created more energy in that meeting? Did I unconstrain my team and make some decisions so that the team can succeed? Those are the things that I think all leaders have to sort of really hold themselves up to.
So here's my takeaway. Like Satya, if you let curiosity and continuous learning steer your career path, then every job you have will fill you with excitement. Satya stayed modest and inquisitive as he moved around different jobs at Microsoft. That curiosity helped him learn how to develop well-rounded skills, lead with empathy, build amazing products, and learn how to adapt to changing market conditions, all of which have helped position Microsoft for long-term success. So in your path, prioritize your thirst for knowledge when making decisions. If you combine that with a little bit of ambition, you can propel your career to unexpected and fulfilling heights.
When I rented the title of CEO, I almost quit. I remember calling the owner and going, fire me before I ruin Essence.
Welcome to The Path, where I, Ryan Roslansky, sit down with the biggest change makers, innovators, and thought leaders in the world. At the end, we'll see what turning points shaped the journey of these incredible success stories. Today, I sit down with Caroline Wonga. Caroline spent 15 years at Target, working her way up from intern to Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Until one day, she left retail for a career in media when she landed the role of CEO of Essence. Her path is as atypical as it gets. Here's how Caroline Wonga paved her path.
You're an amazing CEO, entrepreneur, but let's go way, way back.
Way back.
To a young Caroline.
Yes.
Maybe the first time in your childhood when you can ever remember at all even thinking about maybe what you wanted to be when you grew up.
So I'm from Kenya, right? And I was born in a country where what I looked like was not a barrier. The president, the pastor, the policeman, they all look like me. Transition to my dad comes to the US to get his PhD. And so for the first time, there were things that were barriers based on what I looked like or who I was that I didn't understand. And so it actually started probably about an 18-year journey of making myself small. I started to get rid of my accent. I wouldn't invite anybody over to my house because my food smelled funny. When I left high school, I got pregnant my first semester in college. I decided to be a mom, so I went to work.
After Caroline dropped out of college, she started her career in the nonprofit world, working in youth development programming. But after 7 years of hard work, she was being passed over for promotions because she didn't have a college degree. She said she was frustrated, but she knew that without that piece of paper, her career wouldn't grow. She eventually found a school in Texas with a single-parent program. It gave her the resources to raise her daughter while in college. Around that time, she landed an internship at Target and eventually a manager role before she even graduated.
I decided Target was cool, but I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do there, right? Some great mentors had me decide 4 experiences I wanted to have.
So you put them all down at once?
I put them all on paper.
Love it.
Literally was laid out like a flow chart. So I show that document to my HR partner and my boss, and I say, these are the things I want to do.
Of course, she ended up doing every single thing on that list.
I ended up being an ERG leader of our Black Affinity Group. And for the first time, I met the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So inquired about it and decided that if I was going to serve my time in corporate, that was where I was going to work because it was the closest thing corporate had to a soul. Remember, I'm a nonprofit girl. So I drew another map, literally drew it. This one had VP of D&I at the top.
She shared that map with her boss, with HR, and the then VP of Diversity and Inclusion at Target, the job she wanted. That takes guts, which is a great lesson to keep in mind. One of the first steps towards reaching your career goals is to be vocal about what you want. Because she spoke up, it only took a few years for Caroline to land at the top of her map.
My job became to create environments where authenticity was democratized. I got scared. I was like, how in the world is my job to tell people they can come as they are? And there's a whole bunch of stuff about me that I'm not living honestly. And I remember the first thing I did was cut my hair. And I started locks because I remember having been told that that wasn't appropriate in corporate America. And I spent that whole week worried that I was going to get fired. So when I realized that didn't change, I was like, bam, blue lipstick. Nobody cared. So what I toed into reintroducing Caroline.
Caroline was finally bringing her authentic self to work, which inspired others to do the same. And as head of D&I, she introduced company-wide goals at Target, including diversifying the employee base, the company's suppliers, and even the dolls on the shelves. She was making her mark in corporate America as an effective and compassionate leader. Meanwhile, in a completely different industry, Essence was embroiled in a controversy about its culture, and its owner was looking for someone to propel the company mission forward, for Essence to be a trusted home for Black culture. And the name Caroline Wanga came across his desk.
And I'm like, you want who to come run Essence? I'm not a media girl. Like, I'm not going to break that thing. What I was actually told about why it was time for me to do that was because of the way that I was living my life and how they wanted that to be a part of what I delivered in the role. Had I not made that decision, this opportunity doesn't come.
That last part, though, that jump to becoming the CEO, that's not an easy, like, mental jump to make.
When I rented the title of CEO, I almost quit. I remember calling the owner and going, fire me before I ruin Essence. The amount of doubt in terms of leadership, in terms of fiscal responsibility, in terms of the pain, the haters, the everything under the sun became really heavy. When I made that call to the owner, he said two things to me that to this day are what get me through the hardest days of CEO. It is how you live your life that this brand needs, because it has always been an inspiration that pulled the culture forward. The second thing he said was, when I called around about you, you won everywhere you went. He said, I just want somebody who knows how to win. Those two statements did so much to resolve that inner saboteur. It's still there. It pops up on a daily basis. On the days where that inner saboteur is like, you can't be a CEO, I go back to those two things.
Since 2020, Caroline has served as CEO, tasked with reshaping Essence's future in media. That same year, she and her daughter, Cadence, co-founded Wanga Woman, where Caroline uses her experience to teach leaders, companies, and professionals about the importance of authenticity.
How do you answer that question for someone who wants to do what you did or wants to be like what you've become?
Who you are is who you are. If you cannot be who you are, where you are, you change where you are, not who you are. There are so many opportunities that I missed making myself small. And those that are moving into early career have an opportunity to change the way of working that centers on the who. My second one is it is never about a role. It is always about an experience. The people who get tapped on the shoulder and you're like, why didn't I never know about that job? Those are the people that spend their time looking for experiences, not jobs. Because in those experiences, they meet the person who does the shoulder tap for the job that was never going to be posted, that just got approved by the board yesterday. Boom, here's our new VP of whatever. How do you answer that question?
You want me to follow that? I would say, similar to your map concept, I make everyone draw a 2x2. I want you to pick the 2 things that matter most to you in your career. And they're often something like learning, or they're something like impact. They actually are rarely title. And then it becomes simple because you're either in the top right of that quadrant of the things that you care about, or you're not. And if you're not, you know how to fix it.
Yep.
And then it becomes less about all the noise and what I should be doing or what my mom thinks I should be doing, or it's you have control of it and follow it this way. So I think that just having that, ability to take control of your own career and have a map to it is something that we both share in common.
So here's my takeaway. For a lot of people, particularly people of color, there's something or someone that tells you to change who you are when you enter the workforce, to conceal your authentic self. And you don't have to. For Caroline, making herself small and invisible was what she thought would bring her success. As an immigrant, she wanted to fit in. She went back to college even though she didn't want to, and spent years climbing the corporate ladder as somebody else. Along the way, Caroline had maps with career destinations, constantly negotiating the path to get there, and realized she shouldn't have ever negotiated who she was for the sake of a title. And once she embraced the locks and that blue lipstick, a swarm of opportunities opened up and made it her mission for others to do the same.
Very often we miss the biggest opportunity that is right in the place we are by looking so much out. It's okay to look out, but it's okay to realize where you are too.
Welcome to The Path, where I, Ryan Roslansky, sit down with the biggest change makers, innovators, and thought leaders in the world. At the end, we'll see what turning points shaped the journey of these incredible success stories. Today, I sit down with the man you can thank for making Spanish tapas popular in the United States, Jose Andres. Jose is a chef, a humanitarian, an educator, an entrepreneur, and even a media tycoon. Here's how Jose Andres paved his path.
I want to go way back. A young Jose in Spain. Take me back to what you wanted to be when you grew up.
I wanted to be a lot of things. When I saw that we had people going to the moon, I wanted to be an astronaut. When I visited a hospital with my dad and my mom because they were nurses, I wanted to be them because I thought it was so cool. I think very early on, I always wanted to be a cook because I saw how my mom and my dad were creating happiness out of just feeding the family. With also the crazy things that go in every family, and my brothers and I was fighting against each other. But those were happy moments, and Sim's food was always around. It's not like I decided to be a cook. Food made me join them.
I love that. What part did school play for you early on?
I realized the school system was not great for me. That's why I left school fairly young. I didn't finish high school. I think I only finalized the first year. And my father saw this and sent me to culinary school, which I didn't go because the school was new and didn't even have a kitchen. So I started never going to school, and I began going to restaurants because that's where the real learning was. I think I'm still deciding if I want to be a chef, because the more I know nothing. Everybody makes me an expert on Spanish cooking. I know a lot about the Spanish cooking, but every time I travel across Spain, every single day is 5 new things I learn. Sometimes education puts us in a box.
Yeah.
I think we need to create systems that we are all more out of the box and more interconnected.
So what I've learned already quickly is continuous learning seems to be really, really important to you. I know part of your career, you were in the Navy. What was that experience of your life like?
Life gave me the opportunity to be in the Spanish Navy, but they put me cooking for the admiral, which in a way was a blessing, but in a way was a curse. I wanted to be on a boat, not cooking in another kitchen. I told him, I love to cook for you, but I want to see the world. I began visiting Abidjan, visiting Rio de Janeiro, and going Fortaleza and Maceió, and going to Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo. I saw inequalities and people taking advantage of people. As a young person, that was very impactful.
Fast forward a couple of years, and Jose is out of the military, jobless, with only $50 in his pocket and a set of cooking knives. That's when he decides to go all in on a lifelong dream and move to New York City. He worked his way up to being a cook in Manhattan, and just 2 years later, in 1993, he was asked to lead the kitchen at a new tapas restaurant in Washington, D.C. named Jaleo. At the time, Americans weren't familiar with Spanish tapas, but Jose changed that. Jaleo became a huge success. His work ignited an interest in Spanish cuisine for decades to come and put Jose on the map as one of the best chefs in the world. He would go on to open over 30 restaurants worldwide, even earning himself 2 Michelin stars. He was cooking up a storm, but his skills in the kitchen are just one part of Jose's recipe for success. His secret ingredient is simply caring.
For me, being an entrepreneur is the realization that you are the owner of your business, even if you don't own one share, and taking true ownership in everything you do. I think this is something like I've always realized, that one place I've been, I've always to make it like my own, because you want it to be the best it can be. I was proud in what I did. I was proud in what I cook. And if something was not allowing me to be successful on that front, I will speak up. I will never keep my mouth shut.
Have you found a way to impart that way of thinking on other people or to help other people realize?
We are only as good as our own actions. We can always finger point at others for the lack of success in our own world, when actually you should just finger point at yourself. Life, in a way, is like a big highway. You are the one that decides when to take an exit, when you are not enjoying that path anymore.
I love that.
We'll have the power.
In 2010, Jose formed his nonprofit called World Central Kitchen in instant reaction to the devastating earthquake in Haiti. He flew into the island with no plan but to feed as many people as he could. And he used that experience to later help in future catastrophes: volcanic eruptions in Guatemala, wildfires in California, and hurricanes in Puerto Rico. His work earned him a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. To date, his organization has served over 250 million meals to communities in need. Most recently in Turkey and Syria, where he and his team arrived just 3 days after the massive earthquake shook the region, providing meals to survivors and rescue workers on the ground.
I'm here in Syria, 20 minutes from the Turkish border. This was nothing, and in 24, 48 hours, take a look. We have kitchens, we have amazing peppers.
For me, was this very simple realization that it's hard to be in a community, in a city, or in a planet that you know you're doing well, but then others are not. And what's the role that all of us we can be doing to improve the lives and the situations of other people? We can all complain about how dirty the cities are. Or we can all start just picking up a piece of paper and putting it on the garbage. Sometimes when you want to change the world, sometimes it starts just by one plate of food at a time, or just by picking up a piece of paper and putting it on the garbage can. That's why, for me, being there where the problems are so important, because it's the only way I really understand them. So from hunger to poverty to food deserts to obesity to to climate change, food is right in the middle. And food for me has been this amazing medium that if I put food in the center and I try to solve all the problems the world faces, by giving power to food. It's a fascinating game.
I love that. So I'm curious, what's the advice that you would give to someone who's just trying to figure out they want to be part of something bigger, but they don't know where to start or how to start?
Well, one of the things I really realized early on was we always look far away to see the happiness we don't seem to have where we are. It can be at the personal level, at the family level, at the work level. But very often we miss the biggest opportunity that is right in the place we are. By looking so much out, we lose the opportunity to make something amazing right in the place we control, with the people we love and know. That's the power you have. So I will tell always everybody, it's okay to look out. I've done it and works. But it's okay to realize where you are too.
So here's my takeaway. On LinkedIn, I talk a lot about transferable skills, usually through the lens of shifting careers or industries. And Jose is an incredible example of why that's important. Jose started his career as a chef, but he didn't just become a chef and stop. He used that skill and, most importantly, his passion to take him on a journey through different worlds and industry. He used his skills to launch a nonprofit, become a professor, a documentarian, a podcast host, an author. The point is, one single skill, a passion, and an openness to learn gave him the ability to pursue multiple careers instead of staying on one single path.